Okay, so let's get a historical context where President Trump will be holding his rally. That'll be June the 19th. That'll be Tulsa, Oklahoma. Um, Apparently, there are just too many coincidences here. So let's go to Tulsa Race Riot, 1921. So this is like close to 100 years ago. Tulsa Race Riot of 1921, also called Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. Let's see here. Let's see. Back up a little. Right. Began on May 31st, 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and was one of the most severe incidents of racial violence in U.S. history. Lasting for 2 days, the riots left somewhere between 30 and 100 dead. Well, believe me, it wasn't 30 people. From what I read, it's up to like 300 people were dead, mostly African Americans, and destroyed Tulsa's prosperous black neighborhood of Greenwood, known as the Black Wall Street. More than 1,400 homes and businesses were burned, and nearly 10,000 people were left homeless. Despite its severity and destructiveness, the Tulsa Race Riot was barely mentioned in history books until the late 1990s. Yeah, when I went to high school, I never heard of it. When a state commission was formed to document the incident, on May 30th, 1921, Dick Rowland, a young African American shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator named Sarah Page in the elevator of a building in downtown Tulsa. The next day, the Tulsa Tribune printed a story saying that Rowland had tried to rape Page, with an accompanying editorial stating that a lynching was planned for that night. That evening, mobs of both African Americans and whites descended on the courthouse. Let's see, shut this off. Descended on the courthouse where Rowland was being held, when a confrontation between an armed African American man there to protect Rowland and a white protester resulted in the death of the latter. The white mob was incensed, and the Tulsa riot was thus ignited. Over the next 2 days, mobs of white people looted and set fire to African American businesses and homes throughout the city. Many of the mob members were recently returned World War I veterans trained in the use of firearms and are said to have shot African Americans on sight. Some survivors even claim that people in airplanes dropped incendiary bombs. When the riot ended on June 1st, the official death toll was recorded at 10 whites and 26 African Americans, even though many experts now believe at least 300 people were killed. Shortly after the riot, there was a brief official inquiry, but documents related to the riot disappeared soon afterward. The event never received widespread attention and was long noticeably absent from the history books used to teach Oklahoma school children. In 1997, a Tulsa Race Riot Commission was formed by the state of Oklahoma to investigate the riot and formally document the incident. Members of the commission gathered accounts of survivors who were still alive, documents from individuals who witnessed the riots but had since died, and other historical evidence. Scholars used the accounts of witnesses and ground-piercing radar to locate a potential mass grave just outside Tulsa's Oaklawn Cemetery, suggesting the death toll may be much higher than the original records indicate. In its preliminary recommendation, the commission suggested that the state of Oklahoma paid $33 million in restitution, some of it to the 121 surviving members who had been located. However, no legislative action was ever taken on the recommendation, and the commission had no power to force legislation. In April 2002, a private religious charity, the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, paid a total of $28,000 to the survivors, a little more than $200 each. Imagine that, $200 each, using funds raised from private donations. Okay, so that's the end of that story. Let's go now to where the Republican National Convention will be held. I believe it's July 27, and this will be in Jacksonville, Florida. So you have to wonder, Trump is holding his rally, Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street was burned to the ground, hundreds of black people died, and now he's going to go to Jacksonville. And you have to remember, America is a big country. There's so many cities, and there's so many red states. There are probably like what, about probably 34 red states that they could go to. But for some reason, they're choosing these states where there was confrontation and murder of black people. Jacksonville is hosting the Republican National Convention on 60th anniversary of city's KKK race riot. And here you can see a picture of a policeman with a black person, and he's all bloodied. Uh, Black and white picture. But this guy, you can see the blood all over his shirt. And this is Jacksonville, Florida, with the largest civil rights movement in contemporary history playing out as a backdrop. Jacksonville is now celebrating the fact it will officially host the 2020 Republican National Convention. Coincidentally, will be held on the 60th anniversary of a race riot in that city, right? Known as Axe Handle Saturday. On August 27, 1960, more than 200 white people, including Ku Klux Klan members, chased down black people in the streets of Jacksonville and beat them to submission with baseball bats and axe handles. Now it appears the marking of this horrific occasion will be honored with a convention honoring our country's biggest bigot. The event happened after years of bubbling racial tensions in Jacksonville, including a local high school being named after the first Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Mayor Lenny Curry, a Republican, made the announcement yesterday in a flashy social media video, stating that the convention will be held from August 24th to August 27th, which means Trump will likely give his closing speech at the same moment that 60 years prior, Jacksonville police allowed KKK members to violently attack black protesters. If you think you know Jacksonville, think again, said Mayor Curry in the video. For the unfamiliar, the events of Axe Handle Saturday are eerily similar to current day protests. The riot began after the Jacksonville Youth Council and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the NAACP, organized a peaceful lunch counter demonstration to protest segregation. So this was peaceful. See, these people were just sitting in at what was this, Woolworth? Peaceful. The attack began with white people spitting on the protesters and yelling racial slurs at them. When the young demonstrators held their resolve, they were beaten with wooden handles that had not yet had metal axe heads attached, wrote Dr. Ben Brotmackle, executive director of the Florida Historical Society for the State Archives. Rodney L. Hurst, who, as a 16-year-old in 1960, led sit-ins at whites-only lunch counters in Jacksonville, wrote about the incident in his book. It was never about a hot dog and a Coke. The intent was to scare, intimidate, and bring physical harm, Hurst says about the KKK. Many times you could not draw a line between the Klan and law enforcement because the law enforcement were at least accomplices to a lot of the things the Klan did. The event came after years of bubbling racial tension in Jacksonville, including a local high school being named after the first Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan B. Forrest, in 1959. Of course, Jacksonville has since renamed that school to Westside High School, and whites-only lunch counters no longer exist. But it's tough to argue that things have gotten a whole lot better. Last week, 1,200 former Justice Department staffers called for the resignation of Attorney General Bill Barr after he ordered the violent beatings of peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters so Trump could be photographed holding a Bible in front of a church. Plus, earlier this week, Trump threatened to invoke the 1807 Insurrection Act, which would allow him to use the military against U.S. citizens. None of this is surprising, coming from the same man who referred to neo-Nazis in Charlottesville as very fine people and just recently rejected the idea of renaming military bases currently honoring Confederate military commanders. So, of course, the upcoming GOP convention is racially tone deaf beyond belief. It is also tough to believe this. His upcoming rally in Tulsa on Juneteenth, the anniversary of the United States ending slavery, is anything but a grotesque dog whistle. Jacksonville is a great city that will showcase Florida's energies, facilities, entrepreneurship, and commitment to bring together the delegates of the Republican Party at a historic time in our nation's history, said Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a press release. With absolute zero irony, there is no better place to host a Republican National Convention than in the nation's largest swing state that is also home to President Trump and to the country's best governor. We are thrilled Florida was selected and we will not let them down. Okay, so that's it. So Trump will be holding his rally in Tulsa, and then the Republican National Committee that will obviously nominate Trump to run again for re-election will be held in Jacksonville, where you had one of the biggest race riots, black people being beaten in Jacksonville, and also the rally coming up next week that will be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You have to ask yourself why. You know, I mean, in a country with 50 states and some of those states, you going back years, it's not like now where you have like black people maybe all over America. Back in those days, you know, there are certain states you rarely saw any black people. So you could have gone to those states and you want to have this contention or asking these questions. Why? No, but no, that's the way they want to do it. Uh, to go to these particular states or these particular cities where peaceful protesters or what have you were either being killed, and that's one of the legacy we'll remember from the Trump presidency.